Hello, everyone, and welcome to this evening's session. Tonight, we will be discussing Cherokee absentee voting with special guest, former Tribal Council member, Jack Baker, and our host, Dr. Julia Coates. I'm your moderator, Kimberly Gilliland. We'd like to thank all of the Cherokee Pins Project volunteers that have graciously agreed to participate this evening. Our volunteers and donors make it possible for us to provide free educational webinars. At this time, I would like to request that everyone mute their microphones. The chat room is open. Please feel free to write your questions in the chat room located at the lower right-hand corner of your screen. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's presenters. Julia Coates is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, born in Pryor, Oklahoma, and raised in Northern California. She holds BAs in Anthropology and English from San Francisco State University and a PhD in American Studies from the University of New Mexico. Dr. Coates was a delegate to the Cherokee Nation Constitutional Convention, was the project director for the award-winning Cherokee Nation History course, and served 2 terms for the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council. Our special guest tonight is Cherokee Nation citizen Jack Baker. Born in Chewy, Oklahoma, Mr. Baker is a graduate from Oklahoma State University with a Bachelor of Science in Accounting. He retired in 1999 from Liberty Mutual Insurance Company after 29 years. Mr. Baker was a delegate to the Cherokee Nation Constitutional Convention, has served as the national president of the Trail of Tears Association, the treasurer of the Cherokee National Heritage Society, Historical Society, is a board member of the Oklahoma Historical Society, and served 2 terms on the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council. Welcome, Jack and Julia.
Thank you. It is really wonderful to be with you this evening, and I'm going to ask Kimberly what's going on here for just a moment, because all of a sudden the PowerPoint left my screen. So tell me what I need to do, if you would, to get it back. Okay, I'm seeing it again. Thank you. Thanks very much. We're really pleased to be with you this evening. And thanks very much to Jack Baker for agreeing to join me on this webinar this evening. In my experience, voting in Cherokee Nation elections is not easy. And so we wanted to go ahead and I've lost the PowerPoint again. There we go. Okay. It's not easy in my experience to vote in Cherokee Nation elections, especially as an at-large person, but for anyone who is voting absentee in particular. And so we wanted to do this webinar in order to walk you through the steps and then bring up a couple of things that generally come up in elections that people have questions about. And then we're also open to taking additional questions and comments from people as well. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. And if we can go to the next slide. Jack, this first slide is simply about the process of registering to vote. So will you walk us through what one needs to do to
Yes.
do this?
And I'll have to move it a little bit closer for me.
Yeah.
Because if you're over 18 years of age and a registered citizen of the Cherokee Nation, then you're eligible to vote in our Cherokee Nation elections. And it doesn't matter where you live. And the first step is to fill out and submit a voter registration form to the Cherokee Nation Election Commission. Now, just because you're registered with the Cherokee Nation does not mean that you're registered to vote. You have to register specifically with the Cherokee Nation Election Commission. And the form can be downloaded from the Cherokee Nation website, cherokee.org. You click on government, then click on boards and commissions, and then click on the election commission. And then click on forms, maps, and documents. And the form, when you fill it out, can be mailed, faxed, or emailed to the election commission at the address number below. And the address is Post Office Box 1188, Tahlequah, Oklahoma 74465. Or you can email it to election-commission@cherokee.org. So it's very important that you have until March. You have to become a registered voter by March 29th of 2019. So the Election Commission has to receive your application to register by then. But any questions on that?
I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah. Now, there's something special for at-large voters between the ages of 18 and 25 if this is their first time registering to vote. Can you tell us about that? Because this was quite a discussion. You and I were both at the Constitutional Convention, and this was quite a discussion that went on about this particular thing.
Yes. Under our new Constitution, it provided for 2 at-large council members who live outside the Cherokee Nation. Now, prior to that, all of us voted, we chose a district within the Cherokee Nation. And for most of us, it was either our hometown or where our families were from. We generally chose that district. Now, many people wanted to continue this choice. So if you're a first-time person to register to vote, and you're between the ages of 18 and 25, and you live outside the Cherokee Nation, then you have the option of either electing a district within the Cherokee Nation or voting at large. Now, this is a one-time selection. You cannot change it once you're between the ages of 18 to vote. By the time you're 25 and are answer the question on that. One of the districts, but it's a little confusing on the form because it doesn't show a place for you to check to select to vote at large. Other than outside the box, it does mention that you would be, that's where you would be registering to vote if you don't choose one of the others. But you have to be under 25 or under.
Right. I think they have, maybe I misunderstood, but I think they've added that box. Isn't that the one at the top? Or? Okay,
it may be, because I haven't seen the latest forms on that. Actually, It's above the box, I believe, is where you can check to vote at large.
Right.
So that it's a little confusing, but like I said, you can elect to vote within the Cherokee Nation if you so desire. If you live outside the nation, you can elect to vote in one of the districts, but you still can vote absentee for that district.
I think we can go to the next slide now.
Question there.
Okay. So this has some things that I recall, at least from the discussion at the Constitutional Convention, that there were some people that, even though they lived at large, they wanted to vote in boundary. They specifically did, either because I remember one person in particular, they still had allotment lands in Delaware County, which is why they wanted to vote in district. So there are some reasons that people want to vote in district oftentimes, correct?
Yes. And also, if you had been voting within the district, you could continue to do so.
Right.
So even though you're over 25, if you had always voted within the district within the Cherokee Nation and elected to continue to do so, then you continue to have that option. Well, actually, you don't have you have to keep voting in that district that you had chosen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to the next screen. Okay. So this is
You can't switch back and forth.
Right. Right. This is after you've mailed in your registration form to the Cherokee Nation Election Commission. This is talking about, or this slide is about what's going to happen next. Okay, so we have, you should receive, and this is different from the last elections, I think, that I recall voting in. They weren't necessarily sending out a verification card, a voter registration card to the at-large people, because we were presumed to all be in the same district. And so we didn't necessarily know if they had received our form, but nowadays, I mean, I was kind of surprised. I got one recently that said, yes, you are registered to vote. So I guess they are sending out verification cards now.
Yes, they're supposed to be sending those out whenever you, and particularly if you register to vote for the first time and do not get it within 30 days or so, then you should contact the Election Commission to be sure that they had received it.
Yeah.
And you also, we might add that you should always put in a name change.
Yes.
Too, with the Election Commission. If a name change, if your name is changed, or also your address, if your address is changed.
Right. So that's the only, those are the only circumstances probably when you would need to re-register to vote, right? Other than that, if your name is the same, as your address is the same, then you're good to go. Okay. There's another little box down here.
Yeah, once you register to vote, then you should stay on the
You know, I'm having technical difficulties with Jack, and I don't know if everyone is having the same difficulties, but sometimes Jack is going in and out, and I feel like I may be interrupting sometimes because I'm not hearing, and so.
Okay.
So I don't know what may or may not be happening. Yeah.
Okay, but you need to register now, because the sooner you register to vote, then the better, because they're going to be, the Election Commission will be very busy with the 2019 elections coming up.
Yeah.
And we have a note from Angela that she can't hear, although I have yet.
Yeah.
So,
There is, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, if you have registered, I mean, you have voted, say, in the previous election, then you shouldn't have any problem. So you shouldn't have any need to check to be sure that you don't really need to check with them to re-register.
Okay. Apparently some people are not hearing anything very well, and so we have on the about accepting the Zoom audio. So this is coming up in the chat about how to get both this video and audio. I saw a question about verifying, and as it says on this screen, you should receive a card within 30 days saying that you are registered to vote. If you do not get that card within the 30-day time frame, as it says, please call the Election Commission to verify that your form has been received. This is another reason to register early and not wait until the March 29th deadline, so that if your form has not been received for some reason, you will still have time to submit it again. Okay, so I think we can go to the next screen. And this is in really big letters. So Jack, you were giving us these dates earlier, I think, right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So
you need to register to vote in the June 1st election for principal, chief, tribal council members by March 29th of 2019. And as Julia said, don't wait until just before then. It's best to register now.
And in 2019, June 1st is the election date. It's we're used to it being at the end of June. I remember from a while ago, it used to be at the end of May, wasn't it, Jack? And then they pushed it back, I think, because it fell on Labor Day or Memorial Day weekend a lot of times, it seems like. But they moved it. So
they actually, and one of the reasons was to give more time between the general election and any runoff election, because a lot of times there are challenges and court cases that have to be worked out in between. So they needed enough time for the Election Commission and the court, Cherokee Tribal Court, to work out any different.
Right. Okay, so we can go to the next screen. Okay. So after registering to vote, the next step is to request an absentee ballot, and there's a separate form for doing that. Again, this is not automatic. Even if you have checked the box that you are an at-large voter, they're not automatically going to send you an absentee ballot. You have to actually send in a second form to receive that ballot. So you want to take us through this, Jack? Or?
Yes, because you need to send this in for each election cycle. For example, you have to, if you're already registered to vote, then you have to request the absentee ballot before the election. And like I said, we don't know the exact deadlines right now for requesting those and whatever when the cutoff date is. But it will be after the March 29th cutoff date. It's usually a couple of weeks or so after the registration closes.
But I just noticed I've got the wrong date on this slide. It should be June 1st, so we'll change that. Don't send it for June 2nd, June 1. Thank you.
Yeah. But when you request your absentee ballot for this election, then you should not need to request another one for the runoff election. But if you did not, if you fail to vote in the general election and want to vote in the runoff election, then you would have to request an absentee ballot at that time.
The comment came up from Mike about kind of being ridiculous at this point that we don't have the dates yet for when the absentee ballot request period will be. I think that the Election Commission has been anticipating a special election in Adair County, which is what the sample form is for. That was only just voted last night, I believe. So they are maybe running a tad bit behind. Jack, do you recall if they normally have these absentee request dates by this time or not?
I do not remember exactly when, but it normally is about this time that they come out with them.
Yeah. One thing to think about, and for us to think about, is that I think December 1st is usually the kind of the official kickoff date, because that's when candidates can begin to accept donations. And so it's around that time, I think, that the Election Commission often thinks that we're really beginning to kick it off, you know, and so we may get those dates pretty soon here.
Yes, I'm sure that we will.
As it says, the PINS project will send out an announcement and a downloadable form, so be looking for that. The date when contributions can begin to be accepted is December 1st, I believe, sometime in December, but usually right at the first of the month. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. Jack, do you want to?
Okay. Of course, the absentee ballot request must be received by the Election Commission office before the deadline. And once again, we don't know the exact deadline on that. But you will not receive anything from the Election Commission to notify you that they have received your request for an absentee ballot. Therefore, it's recommended that within 7 to 10 days after sending in the form, you should call to verify that it's been received. And they're very good at answering the phone and letting you know if they received your absentee ballot request. I know in the past there's never been anywhere out that answered. Would be on the ballot. Do you want to answer that, Julia, or do you have it
I'm
farther
sorry,
in the PowerPoint?
it had cut off. You cut out on me for a minute. So what was the question?
I had to. So when do the people file for election?
February 2nd, the first week of February. I don't know exactly what the dates are, but it's the first week of February. So we won't know who all of the candidates are for a couple of months yet. I saw that question come up earlier. Yeah. Okay. I saw a question about the absentee ballot form. It does not have to be mailed in. It can also be faxed in. It can be emailed, scanned and emailed in the same way that the registration form can be. The thing about the registration form is that you'll know that they got it by getting a card. On the absentee ballot request, you won't necessarily know that they got it. So this is the one that I think, you know, and I'm just reiterating what Jack already said, what's on the screen here. I always call them just to make sure that they got that form, because they're generally good, but they do lose these. It hasn't been unknown. You know, it's not unknown for that to happen. So just double check on that. Let's go ahead to the next screen. Next slide. Do we have, there we go. Maybe we're getting a lot of questions that are just like, we're either going to go there in this presentation or they're asking again and again. So maybe on some things we could hold off until the end a little bit. It's kind of becoming a little bit overwhelming. I'm really appreciating the interest that everyone has, but unless the question is about what we are specifically talking about on the slide, maybe we could hold off to the end. Okay. So Jack, I think you may have covered this. You were cutting out on me a little bit, but if you want to.
Yes, I did. I mentioned this earlier. As you said, two important things to remember about absentee voting. You must request an absentee ballot for every election cycle, except for a runoff election. If you voted in the general election, then you will automatically receive an absentee ballot for the runoff. But if you didn't vote in the general election, then there will be a brief time when you will be able to make an absentee ballot request for the runoff election, assuming you're registered to vote. Once again, you have to register by that March 29th deadline.
Okay. So are there any questions about this specifically? I'll wait just a moment because I know people are typing. Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide then. So next we presume that the ballot request, or we verified that the ballot request form has been received, and then we receive the absentee ballot in the mail. And we usually get it about 3 weeks or so before the election. Does that seem right? That's what I recall.
Yes.
Okay. So you have the directions about how to mark it. And once you've done that, then the ballot has to be notarized. And can you walk us through that, Jack? What the process of some of the things about notarizing a ballot?
Yes, it must be notarized, and it's not legal to charge a fee to notarize a ballot for elections. But sometimes notaries are not aware of this, and you may have to remind them. But normally, without any problem. So, but also you can go perhaps to a tag office, or particularly someplace, preferably someplace where you know the people are do business. Then usually there's no problem, even if they may not know you always have a notary.
Okay. So I saw a comment about Bank of America notarizing for free. I'm in Los Angeles. They don't notarize anything at my Bank of America anymore. They just don't do it anymore. So I've always had to go somewhere else. So I think that's probably a branch by branch, rather than saying a particular bank does it. They don't down here. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. And I'll take this one because this isn't really relevant to anything we're doing tonight. But there was an issue some years ago when I was still on the council. I remember that California, this one state, does have specific language that is required by state law that notaries have to follow. And so they were putting an additional little slip of paper in the envelope that had that language on it. Our election commission, about I don't know, maybe 6 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, they decided they weren't going to accept that little piece of paper, that the notary the seal had to go right on the envelope. But what they did start to do was place the language that California required on the envelope. So we're good in California. It's working now. Everything is good. There's a little box on the right side that all ballots have to be received in Tahlequah by 7 p.m. on election day. I don't think the post office there is even open after about 3 p.m. on election day. So make sure that that you mail early. Make sure that it gets there. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. Okay. Are there any, before we move on to this, are there any questions about notarizing in particular? Okay, so seeing none, Jack, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, these are some cautions and recommendations about voting the Cherokee election, because sometimes a specific candidate or their campaign will send you a registration form and an absentee ballot request, and return addresses to their campaign rather than to the election commission office. So our recommendation is that you fill out the form, but use your own return address so that you receive your absentee ballot back yourself rather than it going to the campaign office of a candidate.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide also. Okay.
And I'll let you take that one, Julia.
Okay. the political campaigns, the reason they do this, they want you to send your registration form through their office or your absentee ballot request through their office first. It's because, and Jack and I saw that Meredith Fraley is on this webinar as well, and we'd like to acknowledge her service on the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council for many years as well. So she well knows this also. Anybody who's done a political campaign, you don't get necessarily very good information about the voters from the Election Commission office. You get a voter registration list, but it can be incomplete in terms of phone numbers, social network addresses, information, email addresses. So it makes it very difficult for candidates to contact voters except through direct mail, which is really expensive. So one of the reasons that campaigns do this is because they want to get better information. So when your forms go through a campaign office, they are using the information on those forms to build their databases. Now, there's nothing really nefarious about this. It's just, because they want to be in contact with you as easily and as effectively as possible. And usually because campaigns want you to vote, they will generally make sure that the forms that they receive do get turned into the Election Commission. So I think when it comes to your registration forms, your absentee ballot request forms, I kind of agree, it's probably safest to send it directly to the Election Commission. But if you're going through the campaign of a candidate that you support, and that you maybe want them to have your information, then it's probably, you might, want to send it to them. So if you do send your form through a campaign, the recommendation is to follow up, always follow up with the Election Commission, just to make sure that ultimately they have received it, whether it's your registration form or your ballot, your absentee ballot form. But I think this is what Jack had said, do not ever mail your actual ballot to a campaign. If I was understanding you earlier, Jack, is that what you were saying? Yeah. Always mail your absentee ballot directly to the Election Commission. Is there any other thoughts you have, Jack, to add to this, or?
No. I think that covers it.
Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Being in Oklahoma City, Jack, do you want to take this one?
Okay. So
this
what
is
if
not
someone
going to matter in Los Angeles.
Right. So what if someone comes to my door offering to notarize and collect my ballot? And this usually only happens in Oklahoma. So those in Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Muskogee, and other areas, either within or outside the Cherokee Nation boundaries.
Okay.
So
the next slide.
Right. That actually puts pressure on you. I think I would prefer being able to go ahead and vote in my own time. But if they do come to your door, then they're usually from the campaign of a specific candidate. And our recommendation is to decline the offer. It can be very intimidating to have someone standing and waiting for you to vote so they can notarize it, even if it is someone you know or from the campaign as someone you intend to vote for. Politely decline the offer. Tell them you have already voted or they've anything to add, Julia? Do you
Julia, Jack is trying to ask
add
if
to
there's
that,
anything you'd
Julia?
like to add.
Okay, Jack's cutting out. I'm not hearing anything. So what was the question?
Just whether you would like to add anything.
I don't think so. I mean, this is often presented as a convenience to you, you know, that we're from this and such campaign and here's our notary and, you know, but I mean, the danger in this, of course, is that they may be actually standing there watching you mark your ballot. And that's the part that can be intimidating. And if they take your ballot, I mean, you don't necessarily know what they're going to do with it. And so even if they have notarized it, I think on our next slide, if we can go to that. And again, in great big letters, do not ever give your ballot to someone from a campaign who has come to your door offering you the convenience of collecting your ballot. We have seen instances in the Cherokee Nation campaigns where campaign workers have walked into the Election Commission office on Saturday afternoon of Election Day with literally hundreds of ballots that they have collected. And this is legal under Cherokee Nation law. But I think we can all see that there could easily be problems with this. So it's best, even if it's somebody that you know, if somebody is coming to your door offering to notarize your ballot, offering to collect your ballot, just say, I've already made other arrangements for that, or I've already sent it in, or just politely decline in order to make sure that your ballot is secure and that your ballot does indeed get counted. So mail it yourself. Right? Have a family member mail it if you're unable to physically do it yourself. You have anything to add to that, Jack?
No.
Okay. So our next slide. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for holding your questions until this moment. So now I guess we can, Jack, if we can bring up the chat perhaps and look through and see if there were things that or if you have other questions at this moment.
Are there any other questions?
I'm running through the chat right now, so that's why I'm being kind of silent.
Request forms do not require notaries.
No.
It's only the absentee ballot itself that requires a notary.
Right. Okay, so here's one, just to be clear, if you have voted in the last election and do not need to register, will you still get a confirmation card that says you can vote? No, you will not. The only time you will get that confirmation card is if you are registering for the first time, or if you are registering because you have changed your name or changed your address. But if you have voted in a previous election and your address and your name are the same, then you should already be registered to vote. Here's one, Jack. When are absentee ballots physically counted? Upon receipt or on election day? Do you want to take that one?
Yes, they are counted on the election day. And we have often wanted them to start counting them, opening them and counting them on election day. But it seems they normally wait until after the polls close before they even start counting the absentee ballots. So that makes oftentimes for a very late decision as to who has won an election.
I've often thought in the at-large race, you know, they could start feeding those ballots into the machines like early in the day, even probably
Yes.
after they picked up the last post. And yet recently the at-large race is usually the last one to be announced, and sometimes it isn't even until the next day that we know. So.
Right. And we've actually requested them to start counting them earlier, but I don't know that those requests will have any effect. But it would be good if they started counting them earlier.
Okay. There's a question, if I send an email to my relatives summarizing the instructions and attaching a form, should I link to a website where they can educate themselves on this topic? This webinar is being recorded, and I think the recording will probably be without the technical issues that we've had as individuals. And so it is going to be archived and available on the Cherokee Pins Project's YouTube channel, as are all of the webinars that we've done thus far. And so they can look at it there. They can go through the screen. They can stop it as they need to. And so that's going to be a very, very good way for them to be able to get information. So be sure to tell them about that. Subscribe to Cherokee Pins on YouTube. On YouTube, we have a channel, and you can look at this webinar, and you can look at all of the webinars that we've done so far on that channel. There's another question about any idea as to the percentage of voters from within Oklahoma, within boundary, I guess I think you mean, probably, because remember, a lot of Oklahoma voters are at large as well, in relation to absentee voters. And yes, you said I meant that large voted. So Jack, do you have any idea about that? Or?
No, I don't remember those percentages.
Yeah. What I remember is that about 40% of the vote was absentee. Now that includes people within the boundary, though. I think that about the last principal chief's race, I believe, was it close to 20,000 that voted, and I think about 25% of those were at large. So,
Yep, something like that, yes.
Yeah, that's usually about what it is anyway, about 25%. So we don't vote in proportion to our numbers, because we are, we are the largest portion of the population. Will you and Jack do more webinars to educate us voters on issues and candidates so we know how we want to vote? Not through the PINS project, I won't be. What about you, Jack?
No, I'm not planning to, no.
So, I have an email list that I think many of you are on it. If you're not, get in touch with the PINS project and request to be added. I think for the PINS project, we're more interested in doing sort of neutral, informational things. Maybe, we might do some things, but I think there are going to be plenty of other places where issues and candidates are going to be discussed, including the Cherokee Phoenix, that always does a really nice supplement in which the candidates can respond to questions. Okay, well, if there are no more questions at this point, I want to thank you very, very much, Jack, for being with us tonight. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties when we're joining in on things, I mean, literally from around the world. That's bound to happen. But it's been a pleasure to hear from you and to listen to you tonight. And, thank you so much once again.
Thank you, and it's been my privilege to be here. And thank you for the PINS project and all that you do with it.
Our pleasure. Okay, so I guess that's it. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight.
Thank you for joining us tonight. Special thank you to Mr. Jack Baker and Dr. Julia Coates and everyone at the Cherokee PINS Project Foundation. This webinar has been recorded and will be available on the Cherokee PINS YouTube channel. To learn more about the Cherokee PINS Project Foundation or to get involved, please contact us at www.cherokeepins.org or email us at cherokeepins@gmail.com. Thank you and good night, everyone.